felt them everywhere in the house, and I didn't care if it was in the morning or at night. All day long I heard their voices and I felt them moving around me. I was afraid to sleep. I was afraid my eyes would get blinded and I would wake up in front of them. I don't know what these ghosts or ghouls or whatever could do to me. I heard something moving behind me. Now it's recording. Or am I doing something wrong? Oh no, the red dot is back. Now it's recording. Okay, I'll move away from the camera. Okay, I'm Akram Bilal. I'm 45 years old. I was the first guy in Egypt to reach 1 billion in his 30s, scientifically speaking, but of course there's nothing good that lasts forever. I lost everything in the last economic collapse. I lost my money in the stock market, and I found out that my girlfriend was only married to me for my money, and she left me after I announced my bankruptcy. I lost everything. And I have nothing left but this house, the house I bought a month before I announced my bankruptcy, and unfortunately, I put the last money I had in it, so now it's all I have. But it's clear that fate didn't make my life better with what I had, so I decided that the house I bought would also be inhabited. Yes, the house I'm living in is inhabited. Do you know how? I found out when I started hearing footsteps in the house at night, and I live alone and no one comes to visit me. I hear voices talking in a hoarse voice and laughing. I sit at night and feel like there's someone with me in the house. Are you going to ask me what's keeping me quiet about all this? I'm going to tell you that the phone I sold the house to is locked and I can't reach it, so I have no choice but to live with them. I lived in the house for 2 or 3 days without feeling anything. And then little by little I started to feel that I'm not alone. I thought I was imagining, but I was sure that I'm really not alone when something started to disappear. And places in the villa started to change, like the quiet places change every night sometimes. I wake up to the smell of something burning. I quickly go to the kitchen, but I'm not on fire, and yet I keep smelling the smell of something burning. My clothes also disappear. There are things I find and things I'm still looking for. I'm still doubting my memory. I'm still doubting my mental strength, but I'm sure that I'm not imagining. I'm really not alone. Peace be upon you. I'm Olivert James, and this is the Narrators Show, a new episode inspired by real events. And from the book of who? From the book of Olivert James, but it's not from the criminal evidence section. It's a story outside the series. So let's see the story of this haunted house. Let's go. I got this camera and decided to record what's happening to me in the house. Day by day, someone said that he tried this camera and thought it was fun, so I said, why not? I don't have anyone and no one cares about me, and maybe this way will make it easier for me what's happening in this haunted house. And it will be a proof that I'm not crazy, and it will help me that I'm really not crazy from being alone in the house. Is that right or what? I said okay, as I decided that every day I will come and open a video and record my day and what's happening to me in this house. Like notes, but in the form of videos. Today is considered my 7th day in the house, and the 2nd day I record my daily life. I arrive to the safest place, a place that I don't feel them around me, and I really feel that I'm alone here in this room. This is a room that is prepared and furnished, and it's ready for any servant that comes to work in the house. In the rest of the house, honestly, their movements and attacks increase, but when I sit in this room, I feel reassured and calm, and that's why I decided to spend most of my time in it and record my memories here about me and my personality. I'm a spontaneous person. I don't leave the house except for the projects that can't be postponed. Other than that, there's no reason for me to leave the house, and that's not the best situation for me, especially in a house like this. I used to spend most of my time in my bedroom, but recently, I feel like someone is standing outside the bedroom door and waiting for the right moment to attack me in it. Today, when I woke up and went to the kitchen to have breakfast, I found out that there's something missing in the fridge. The amount of food that's missing in this house is decreasing with the changing of the kitchen. I'm not prepared. I'm sure of what's happening. I don't eat this amount of food. I'm not crazy. And I imagine things. I'm sure that I'm not alone. Something will happen to me. I'm sure that my end will be in their hands. This is the first time I see them this close. All this time, I was listening to them and feeling them, but this is the first time I see them. I don't know what to do. I was going to the bathroom. I grabbed the door handle and opened the door, but it wasn't opening with me. The bathroom door was locked from the inside. I tried to open it several times, but my attempts were interrupted by a sound moving from the inside, as if someone or something was moving inside the bathroom. I quickly left the door handle and went away. I was still trying to get out of the bedroom, which was at the end of the corridor in front of me, but I was surprised by someone standing in the dark. I couldn't stop myself from getting closer to the bedroom. And my eyes were fixed on the person standing. The person's shadow was more visible the closer I got. He was a very tall and wide person, much taller than a normal human being. He only had a small head. And he was crouching on the ceiling. He was standing in the dark without moving until he started to slowly turn towards me. I didn't know what to do, and I screamed and ran away from the room. I went downstairs and entered the maid's room. And I locked myself in. I was very scared. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how long I could bear what was happening in this house. I had no choice but this house. I didn't know where I would go if I left it. There was no one to ask me, but no, I had to find a solution. I had to put an end to what was happening in this house. This is my house, and no creature can get me out of it. I will find a solution. I'm sure in a building in the middle of the city, specifically in the 5th floor. Apartment 51 in a studio. Most of its walls are covered with a green cover that is used in the visual illusion. Amar was sitting on a chair in front of a camera a few meters away from him. Khalil was standing behind him, and he was adjusting the camera's settings before Amar looked at him and said, "That's it. Wait a minute, we're gonna start filming." Amar shook his head and adjusted his hair quickly before he looked at the camera's lens. Then his friend started counting 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Khalil looked at him with the sign that he started filming. Then Amar started talking. "I'm Amar, I'm 25 years old, I don't have siblings. I live with my parents, and this is my story with my inhabited house." Khalil looked at Amar again, meaning that he stopped filming, and said a solid introduction to the episode. "I want you to come and sit on this chair and start talking." "Well, what's wrong with this chair? We're going to continue filming in the same situation. You don't have a sense of drama. You're going to talk about your house that you doubt is inhabited. You need to sit like this. A drama that gives the story a short and mysterious story. Come on, get up and sit there." Amar sat on the chair and turned towards the chair that Khalil was talking to. He looked at him and said in his secret, "I'm over." Khalil sat on the chair and waited until he got the camera in front of him and adjusted the light. He looked at him after he finished and said, "I'm a movie star." "Khalil, I regret that. I came and told you something and asked for your help. Come on, shut up, look at the camera because we're going to start filming. I want you to focus, talk at ease." Amar passed by and asked him, "Wait, because I don't understand. What should I talk about now?" "Amar, talk from the beginning, from the moment you started feeling that there's something strange in the house." He shook his head and took a deep breath before looking at the camera. And after Khalil asked him to start filming, he started talking. "It all started when Dad decided to buy the house we're living in now. His decision wasn't understood because there's only me, him, and Mom that we're going to live in. So my question was, what are we going to do with all this space alone? But knowing my father's impression, any objection from me wasn't going to be taken into account. 2 days passed, and we moved to our new house." Khalil took Amar's hand, meaning that he stopped filming again. So Amar got upset and he said with patience, "Why did you stop?" "Uncle Khalil, son, how long am I going to teach you? Let you have a cinematic feeling, and what's his relationship now? I'll explain all of this as a prelude to the story itself when he told you your story. And every part of it is shown in a different frame. It's going to create a mood for the episode. And I didn't tell you I have a problem with your house, and I'm going to solve it for you, so let me do my job." "Okay, Uncle Khalil, when we see. Now I'm going to appear in the next part, but only with my voice. I'm going to ask you questions from behind the camera, and you're going to answer me, from which you're going to tell your story. And from which you're not going to stay in the middle of what you're saying, or you're going to forget details, or you're going to get into anything that has nothing to do with the story. Did you understand the job that I want to do?" Amar nodded, and Ami helped his friend to fix the chair and the camera. They finished, and Khalil sat behind the camera and Amar in front of the camera, and they started filming again. "Tell us, Amar, let's talk about your family and your house." "As I said, we're a small family, and not connected like the rest of the family. I mean, where are we when we all gather in one place to have breakfast or lunch? Most of the time I have breakfast alone and lunch alone, and not only about the food. We were dealing with the whole house as if it was a restaurant. And this was the case in our old house, and when we moved the situation didn't change, but I can say worse. I can sit for days and not see anyone, and this is because our sleeping time and waking time and leaving the house are different. In addition, because no one cares how the others' life is. Okay, you say that you feel that your house is inhabited. Tell us, how did it start? And what made you reach this conclusion?" "It started when I started to hear footsteps in the house at night. I said maybe dad or mom woke up at night to do something, but what was strange was that the sound of the footsteps appeared every night in the same place. And this made me stand up to see who is the owner of these footsteps, but the surprise is that I didn't find anyone, and when I went to dad and mom's room, I found them sleeping in the 7th bed, and to make sure of this, I asked them the next day if someone woke up at night or something, but both of them confirmed that no one woke up at night. And the situation didn't stop at the sound of his footsteps, but I started to notice the disappearance of things from the house. And from my room personally, and when I asked mom or dad, they don't know where they went. And I don't have siblings to take care of me, or even they visit us basically suddenly. And without explanation the things disappear, and the strange thing is that sometimes I find things that I lost, but I find them in different places and strange from their original place. And with the disappearance of these things, the sound of footsteps increases, and I started with them, and I noticed a dream that appears at night in the house. It doesn't do anything, but it wanders in the house in silence. I talked to my parents about the things that I noticed that happened since we moved to the house, but they denied everything. I said and insisted that every time I talk to them about the same thing, they don't see anything. Or anything disappeared from the house, as I said, and as if no one took care of the things that suddenly disappear other than me. Amar's silence turned into confusion. He didn't know what to say again, so Khalil looked at him and asked the next question. So he asked Khalil quickly, did it stop? Until now the truth is no, and that's why I asked for your help. It didn't stop until now. 2 days ago I was in the bathroom taking a shower at night, and I felt someone moving the door and trying to open it. I thought someone wanted the bathroom, so I raised my voice and said I'm inside, but still the door didn't stop, and it was moving as if someone outside insisted to come in. I was sure that this can't be one of my parents. I was scared and nervous and didn't know what to do. I didn't have anything to do, but I stayed with my parents like the other kids, but no one came. I heard a scream as if something came from outside, a scream that stopped all my hair because I was holding the bathroom and I was scared. I felt scared that the words stopped in my throat. I tried to call dad again, but my came out suddenly. One time my voice finally came out, and I called my parents, 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 and I called my parents. My parents, I called them for the first time, but all I found was silence with pity eyes, as if I was a little dreaming about a nightmare. And I to tell them I promised them that I didn't imagine that this really, but I kept telling them that nothing happened. I felt like I crazy, and what made me feel like was dad said that when I telling him what was happening, he was in the bathroom and sleeping behind the bathroom pillow, and if something had happened, he would have felt it. I didn't know if it was just my imagination or if there was something wrong with the house. Amar finished his speech and replied to his friend in a funny way. As you have heard, we have one more night. We will go to Amar's house and try to find out if his house is really inhabited or just an imagination. Khalil stopped filming and stood behind the camera. Khalil picked up the stand and said to Amar, "Let's go. When are we going to your house?" Amar took his phone out of his pocket and looked at the time and date. He said without raising his eyes from his phone, "Can I go with you tonight? Mom and Dad are going to visit my grandmother and they will be late." "Yes, you can." "Okay, fine. I will go now and tell them that I can't go with them to my grandmother's house. I will call you to arrange it." Amar left Khalil's house and went to his house. After he made a deal with Khalil, they made a deal about what they were going to do. It was 11 o'clock at night in Amar's house in one of the neighborhoods. Amar took a cigarette out of the cigarette case in his pocket and lit it. He took a deep breath from it and took it out before he threw the case and lit it on the sofa next to him. He opened his phone and looked at the time. He realized that he was late. He said, "Where is Khalil? And where is this jerk?" Amar raised his phone and waited for Khalil to answer it to explode it. He got a phone call and the doorbell rang. He was carrying a box on the door. He quickly put the cigarette in the box that was on the table in front of him and opened the door. "Didn't we tell him to be here at 10 o'clock? Did you see how much I was late? He put me in first and made me late." Amar noticed the huge bag that Khalil was carrying, so he quickly extended it. He carried it with him to the living room. They put it on the floor and Khalil came down to the floor next to it. He opened it and started to take out his cameras and microphone. He said, "I was late because I was picking up this thing and trying to put my new camera in the bag, so that nothing happens to it. Do you know how much I paid for it? What's wrong with this camera? Why didn't you get your old one? Or is Khalil on the floor and he's holding the camera? Isn't this the one that shoots the rays under the sun? If there's something in the house, this is what will appear to us. Go make us 2 cups of tea until I put the things together. Amar shook his head and went to the kitchen to make tea. He got tired and went out with 2 cups of tea for Khalil, who had finished setting up the cameras. He sat on the sofa waiting for Amar. Amar put the 2 cups on the table and sat down. Look, now I have the camera and the microphone. I'll take the camera and you'll take the microphone and we'll walk around the house in peace. Let's try to catch anything. Amar took a shower on the 2 lights that were in front of him. Khalil replied to him and said to him, "Yes, take this." Khalil gave him a flashlight and he held one. He continued and said to him, "We will turn off all the lights in the house. And we will walk around in peace with the camera and the microphone and these flashlights. All right, let's go." Amar took a deep breath and shook his head and said, "He is trying to excite himself like Khalil. Let's go." They took the 2 cameras that Khalil had set up, as they had agreed, and they began to turn off all the lights in the house, until they reached the last key. They opened their blinds and closed them as well. Amar's nerves were tense, but he was trying to hide it from his friend who was excited in a strange way, and he was filming with his strange camera. All he could think of was that all the events that had happened to him were happening in his place, and he was not doing anything. So what could happen? He was looking for them by himself, and he was trying to find something strange happening. Half an hour passed and they turned the floor, but without a plan. They turned the floor 3 times, and they reached the same point without the camera or the mic recording anything. They finished their last turn and stood in the middle of the floor. And Amar said in frustration, "I don't understand. This floor was the floor where I hear the most footsteps and movement. I mean, why didn't I find anything?" Khalil put his hand on his shoulder and said, "Would you like to turn the floor one last time? Maybe we missed something." Suddenly, they heard a voice coming from the floor above them. A light movement, but it was enough to scare them and make them run up quickly and prepare themselves to find something. They moved around the floor until they reached the corridor that leads to the bathroom and slept together. They started moving slowly and looking for anything to be seen on the camera, especially that this is the place where Amar said he heard someone trying to open the bathroom door on him. And behind him, he heard a scream. Khalil noticed a large porcelain painting with oil painting on the wall of the corridor. And Amar said, "What is this picture? Is this your father's picture?" "What is my father, you idiot? No, this is a painting of the owner of the villa who died. I told them many times to remove his picture, but they didn't want to. They said, 'Let's take a look until we find something to hang it.' Nonsense, I swear." Amar hit Khalil's back, who was standing still in his place, and he was focusing on something at the end of the corridor. What was he focusing on? But Amar was focusing on where Khalil was before he disappeared and came back. And he was holding Khalil's bag and dragging it with him. With slow steps, a man in his 40s was walking towards them. They couldn't see him well until he came out of the darkness, and he entered the circle of light that came out of the lamp in Khalil's hand. At that time, they saw more than they could see, which was the reason that Khalil and Amar came back more scared. Khalil raised the lamp towards the painting that he had been contemplating for a while, and he put it back towards the man. Before he disappeared, Amar heard a voice full of terror. "Amar, isn't that the one?" Amar realized that the man standing in front of them was looking at them with the same fear and terror that they were looking at him with, and before anyone among them could speak a word or move, the man screamed and fell unconscious. This is how many of them are standing, looking at the man who suddenly appeared, and fell in front of them. None of them knew how to act or what to do. They were so scared that they didn't know what to do. Khalil slowly raised the camera towards the man who fell and said, "What is this?" Amar put his head towards the camera to see what was the reason for Khalil's terror, and he said, "I don't understand. What's wrong with me?" Khalil showed the light image of the man that appeared on the camera screen, and he said, "Do you see the color of the waves around his body?" Amar shook his head and said, "Yes, I see." Khalil showed the camera to Amar and told him to bring it towards him. and he told him to look at the screen and to focus on the color of the waves around his body. Amar opened his eyes and brought the camera towards the man and towards Khalil. And he said, "This man is either a normal human being, or you are a ghost, Khalil." The ambulance and the police arrived a quarter of an hour after Amar, and Khalil had spoken to them. Amar's family followed them at full speed after Amar told them that a strange man was at home. Amar's family quickly got out of the car and headed towards Amar and Khalil, who were talking to the officer in charge of communication. They approached him and asked his father about what happened, so the officer answered him, "Don't worry, sir. It's under control. Your son spoke to us at the right time. What happened is that the one who was living with you in this house is a mental patient who ran away from the mental hospital. And we have been looking for him for at least 2 weeks." The mother was shocked, and she held her father's arm, who kept asking how this happened and who this patient was. But for medical and legal reasons, the officer refused to reveal the patient's identity and asked for the information he had before asking for permission and leaving them in shock. Amar approached Khalil and said to him in a low voice, "I told you I'm not crazy." Khalil laughed and said to him, "I didn't doubt the mental strength of the moment, uncle." "Okay, brother, but I'm sorry about this episode." "You're kidding, uncle. This is the best episode I've ever made. Imagine this with me, a house with a resident, but a mental patient. I'm gonna reach 1 million after this episode." 2 days after the incident, the beautiful hostess, who was responsible for the report that came out of Amar's house, went to Dr. Fuad's office in the mental and psychological health clinic. She knocked on the door and waited 2 seconds before the doctor's voice reached her. "Come in, come in." The beautiful hostess came in and greeted the doctor before sitting in front of the office. The doctor grabbed Fuad's phone and ordered 2 coffees from the buffet for them. Jamal spoke and said, "I'm here about the patient who was running away and broke into the villa in Al-Maadi." "Yes, okay. He is accused of something. I know that his work is considered a crime, but he is a patient like you saw." "I saw." Jamal quickly passed by and shook his head. No. He really saw that his mental and psychological condition had no charges against him. These are just simple procedures to close the case. I wanted to ask about his condition, so I sent you the videotapes I told you about on the phone. Jamal put 3 videotapes on Fuad's desk. He shook his head and took them from him and left his place. He is begging Jamal to come with him. "Come with me. We will continue our conversation on the way." Jamal is waiting for Fuad to start talking to him. The patient's name is Akram Bilal. He is a 45-year-old businessman. He is the first businessman to reach 1 billion in his 30s, and he started from scratch. He lost everything because of the economic collapse that was accompanied by the Corona period. He lost his money in the stock market, and his wife left him after he announced his bankruptcy. But the house he found was the last thing he would buy before he announced his bankruptcy in a month. After he announced his bankruptcy because of the loans he had and the debts he had, the bank booked a house for him, and that was the end for him. The same day, the press entered his house and his mind could not bear the shock. He entered a world of his own imagination. There was no danger to his life or to the life of anyone here. Unfortunately, he did not have guards like most of the cases we have. By mistake, one of our nurses knew how to take her keys and run away. "Excuse me, doctor. How did he go back to his house after he ran away? Didn't he think he was under house arrest?" As I told you, his mind did not understand the shock, and to protect him from the reality that he did not want to face, he created another world for him. A world that stopped at the moment of his bankruptcy. The first shock he could bear and continue with it. The next shock was that he would be homeless and live on the street. After he got out of the hospital, his mind erased everything that happened from his memory. He returned to his house again to live in it, as if he was on a journey, for example. "Where are you?" But he said that the house was not empty when he came back. How did he not notice this and said that the house was full of holes in the records he was recording? As you told me, Nabza, about the family who lived in the house, that they were not present in the house a lot. And all day long, all the members of the family stay outside and do not return except at night. He said that the moment he entered the house was a time when there was no one in the house. And he kept sitting and dealing because this is his house, and nothing happened. Until he heard them and felt a movement in the house. His mind imagined that these are the sounds of holes. He was afraid and went to the basement out of fear. Specifically, in the servants' room that was there. He kept living in it and was convinced that what he heard and felt was the sound of holes. Not more. But, doctor, there was a tape that said that he saw someone in the house, but he described it as inhuman. How is this? By God, Jamal, I am not surprised by something like this, honestly. He really saw one of the members of the family and saw it in its natural form. But his mind, as a protection for him, added some imagination and extra details to the image. And in the end, what came to his mind was that he was convinced that the house was really inhabited by hives. And that this is one of the hives that inhabited the house. Jamal shook his head in understanding and continued walking until he reached Akram's room in the basement. He entered the room quietly and stood looking at him, and he sat on the bed, stretching his back. Jamal asked in a low voice, "What is the situation now, doctor?" When he entered the room for the first time, he was silent all the time and did not give any reaction, nor did any one of us react. But from the moment of the incident, the situation changed. He asked us for a video camera and empty tapes, and every day he would record himself as he did at home. That's why when you told me about the tapes, I was not surprised. Akram stood up from his place and turned to the table next to his bed. He took the camera from it and went back to his place again. He put it in front of him, turned it on, and started talking. I felt them everywhere in the house, and I did not care in the morning or at night. All day I heard their voices and felt them moving around me. I was afraid to sleep. I was afraid that my eyes would be blinded and I would wake up in front of them. I did not know what these ghosts or ghouls could do to me. I felt something moving behind me. He turned his head towards Jamal and Fawad, who were looking at him. He looked at them before he opened his eyes in fear, and he shouted and entered a deep sleep. Jamal knew that Akram's condition would remain like this until he was convinced, in one way or another, whether by treatment or not, that he had passed the stage of bankruptcy in another stage, which was that he did not have a home. Therefore, his only treatment was to be convinced that he was not at home at all. Then his mind gradually began to connect that there is no home, that there are no ghosts, that there are no ghouls, that there are no ghosts of terror and horror that enter this house. At the end, Jamal aimed to follow Akram's condition from afar, and this is because the condition he was in was not easy, and getting out of it would be more difficult than the bankruptcy that Akram himself suffered. What do you think will happen? Will Akram continue to realize what he is in? Or will his life end here because of the ghosts and ghouls he sees? And that's it. I hope you liked the story. I thank Oliver James very much for her writing for this episode, and for the plot twist that happened at the end, and it turns out that there are no ghosts or anything. I thank her very much, and I thank you very much for making it this far. And I hope if you like the story, you like and share, and subscribe to the channel if you are not subscribed. Activate the bell button to receive all new. Join the group on YouTube to see the episodes, and that's it. See you in the next episode, and good night.